I didn't understand why her father kept her locked in the run-down shed in the woods. And when I first saw her chained in that musky place, I was too drunk to figure it out. If only I had paid attention, I might have been able to save her. Judging by the dozens of missed calls on my dying phone that afternoon, high school officials had informed my mom that I had skipped again. My friends and I had something more important to do than calculus. Getting shit-faced drunk in the woods behind the school. And before I knew it, it got dark, and the group disbanded. And in my drunken haze, I must have taken a wrong turn, because I wound up deeper in the woods, where I came across the lone shed. As far as I could tell, it didn't belong to any home or cottage. It was just there, in the middle of nowhere. A hunter's shed? I wondered. No. What the fuck would they be hunting here? Groundhogs? Stumbling forward, I began hearing sobs escaping through the cracks of the old wooden structure. They were definitely the cries of a human girl. My head spun around in a pleasant buzz, turning a simple walk into an awkward, zigzaggy trek. And as I reached the shed, my foot sunk into a particularly deep patch of snow, causing me to lunge forward. My hand rose towards one of the walls for support, and it went right through the wood. The plank disintegrated into soft mush, like a soggy piece of bread. Gross. After steadying myself and wiping my hand on my pants, I peered into the hut through the hole that I had inadvertently created. It was blurry inside, though that was probably due to the alcohol in my system. I squinted to try to make out shapes through the darkness, but it was almost impossible to see. If I hadn't heard another whimper, I might have missed her entirely. There was a girl, maybe 5 years old, curled up in the corner. Her legs and arms were bound in a thick iron chain, which rattled as she desperately pawed at the stuffed bear just out of reach. And she looked up, and for a brief moment, our eyes met. I could feel her fear and sorrow chipping away at my heart. Through her messy, curly black locks of hair, her lips stretched into a shy smile. She was covered in filth, but seemed otherwise healthy. What kind of sick monster can do this to a kid? I wondered. Hey! I called out, still wearing a solemn smile. She stretched an arm towards me, but the chains held it back. She didn't speak, but her hopeless eyes told me what I needed to know. I'll get you out of there, I promised. I staggered to the door, reaching for the handle. I pushed and I pulled, but the damn thing wouldn't open. The simple latch might have been too much in my drunken state. Returning to the window, I waved to get her attention. I'm gonna go for help, I said through slurred speech. I promise, I'm gonna get you out of there. I ran straight for the nearest squad car as soon as I returned to civilization. My first mistake was banging on the passenger window frantically to get the attention of the cop inside. My second mistake was screaming profanities at the cop as they tackled me to the ground and cuffed me. Why couldn't I have calmly gone up to them and explained the situation in a rational manner? I could have feigned sobriety. It obviously would have worked out better. Instead, I acted like a weird drunken teenager, cussing up a storm and making insane claims that I'd come across a psychopath's murder hut. And I was arrested for drunken and disorderly conduct. Well, fuck, I murmured as the jail cell locked shut. Sober up, kid. Call your mom to pick you up in the morning, said the officer. Fuck, I thought, irritated. I'd gone from trying to free an imprisoned child to winding up just as locked up as she was. And eventually, I dozed off on an uncomfortable metal bench in the back of the cell. In the morning, I was awakened by the sound of jangling keys. The prison guard unlocked my cell and led me to the main desk. I looked for my mom, but she was nowhere to be seen. So, I just get to go home now? I asked. Yeah, he answered, barely paying attention to me. And my mom? She bailed you out last night. She said, and I quote, "Let that ungrateful prick sleep it off. He can walk home in the morning." "It's called tough love, kid," he replied. And I furrowed my brows. Yep. Sounded like Mom, all right. Probably trying to teach me a lesson, like that time that she made me watch a Scared Straight marathon after I was caught shoplifting. "Did anyone check out that shed? The one that I was screaming about last night?" I asked. And the officer laughed, patting me on the back. "Yeah, we sent a few officers to scope the area. There's no cabin, kid. Take my advice. Lay off the drugs," he told me, using a condescending tone that reminded me of my father. Prick. I needed to go back, if only to prove what I saw was real. Mom was probably going to get a call from the school again, but I didn't care. At least I was skipping for a good cause this time. There it was, behind a row of snowy maple trees, the small shed where I'd seen the girl. A new wooden plank concealed the hole that I had made, suggesting that someone had been there since my visit the night before. The door proved much less of a challenge in the light of day and without chemicals swimming in my blood. I was amused by my own inability to complete such a simple task while under the influence. The door scraped along the snow-covered frost floor as I pulled it open. And sure enough, there she was, the girl that I'd seen. And somehow, despite her awful situation, she was fast asleep under a thick blanket. She looked so peaceful that I decided not to wake her. The door to the claustrophobically small shed closed behind me with a click. It was warmer than I expected inside the cracked structure. And roughly the size of 4 office cubicles, the shed was full of oddities such as an army of broken garden gnomes, bags of seashells, an old store sign, as well as normal shed stuff like wheelbarrows, shovels, a car tarp, toolboxes full of rusted equipment, and a lawnmower. The weirdest thing of all was the net stapled to the ceiling. It wasn't a cheap little bug net either. It was the kind that you see on fishing boats, a big, thick net capable of holding thousands of unruly sea creatures. As far as I could tell, it served no purpose other than to freak me out. The girl stirred, her soft brown eyes opening, and she immediately reached for her teddy bear, but it was still too far away. She pulled on her chains to no avail. There was little to no slack, especially on the ones around her ankles. I picked up the teddy bear and I handed it to her. An overwhelmingly happy smile was given to me as a reward. How could she be so upbeat after the horrors that she had endured? "I'm gonna get you out of here," I said. And kneeling down in front of her, I fiddled with the cuffs on her wrists. Unfortunately, lockpicking was a skill that I'd only learned in video games. Try as I might, I couldn't get them undone. Okay, no problem, I thought. Maybe the chains were attached to the mushy, rotten, decomposing walls. Surely I'd be able to break the wood to free her. I pulled off the blanket to reveal a concrete slab which the chains emerged. It looked as though they had been molded right into the block. I needed to use a different strategy. "What's your name?" I asked as I examined each link for signs of weakness. And she didn't answer. Instead, she just smiled and hugged her bear. "Well, my name's Adrian," I told her. I was really counting on finding rusted links that I could break off, but no such luck. Unlike the other objects in the shed, the chain was in pristine condition. If I want to break them, I was going to have to use some tools. I rummaged through the toolboxes for anything that might do the trick. I hammered, I sawed, I wrenched, but it was all in vain. All I had to show for a morning's worth of work were a few scratches and a single link. The chains were simply too strong. The girl silently watched me work. Every now and again, I asked her questions. Her favorite color, TV show, superhero. She only smiled to acknowledge my question, but kept her lips sealed. An animalisque whine escaped her lips while I was in the middle of sawing the chain for the 5th time. Half its teeth had broken off in the process, but I had stubbornly continued my work. I stopped for a moment and I listened, only to hear footsteps approaching. She pointed to one of the corners of the shed as though to tell me to hide, And like a cockroach, I scuttled into the darkness, hiding behind the garden gnomes. One of them glared at me with its beady little eyes. "The fuck you looking at?" I thought. A pair of feet came into view. I was half expecting him to look like a flesh-eating lunatic of some sort, but what I saw was a middle-aged man dressed quite plainly. He shook snow off his salt and pepper hair and closed the door behind him. There was a thick picnic basket nestled under his arm, which he set down next to the girl. "Lunchtime, Emma," he announced, his voice strangely mournful. He pet the child's head, and to my surprise, she didn't recoil in terror. Stockholm Syndrome? I theorized. The man began to pull out a variety of lovingly prepared food items, heart-shaped sandwiches, a bowl of warm soup, colorful fruit kebabs, and even a cupcake for dessert. He took great care in hand-feeding her the meal that he'd made. And as I lay there, watching the scene unfold, he gave me the impression more of a loving father than a murderous child abductor. My stomach gurgled hungrily at the feast, but I tried to will it to stop, for fear that I would give myself away. I couldn't help Elma if I got caught and chained up next to her. And once she finished the meal, he put everything back in the picnic basket and gave her a toy truck. "I'll be back in time for supper, honey." "Be good," he murmured, kissing her forehead. My face twisted at the sight. How could someone be so delusional? I stayed hidden long after he left the shed, just in case he'd come back. And eventually I crawled out, my stiff neck cracking with relief. Emma was playing with her new toy, a happy smile on her face. My afternoon was spent much like the morning, hacking away at the chains to no avail. And as supper drew near, I became increasingly nervous. I knew her father would return soon, and I needed to get home. I had to make a tough call. "I'll be back tomorrow, okay?" She smiled and nodded. I hated the thought of her spending the night alone, but I had to go. There was no other choice. I only had one mission when I got to school the next day. Break into the janitor's closet where he kept the lock cutter. I knew he had one, since the school had performed a random drug search on my unit the month before. I followed Mr. Bentley as he roamed about, picking up litter in the hallway. And every time he looked my way, I'd act like I was checking my phone. I'm not sure if he bought it, but my shifty behavior certainly didn't seem to keep him from eventually unlocking the maintenance closet. I kept my distance and I waited for him to exit. And once he did, I suddenly slid my foot between the door and its frame to keep it from closing. I slipped inside, heart racing, and searched for the lock cutter. There would be trouble if I was caught, and I couldn't afford the delay. Emma needed me, and there was no way I was sitting in the principal's office all day over something as stupid as borrowed school property. I had to be quick. Pushing through the pile of useless junk, I found what I came for. The cutters. It was snowing that afternoon as I traveled back into the forest. Free the girl, bring her to the cops, be a hero, I repeated to myself. They had no choice but to believe me if I brought her in. I clutched the metallic jaws close to my chest, my moist mittens sticking to its cold surface. Emma, as always, welcomed me with a big bright smile. "This time, we're getting you out," I told her confidently. I prayed my plan would work, as I slid the locked cutter jaws between her skin and the shackle around it. The cuff was tight, and there was barely enough room for it to fit, but I managed to wiggle it in anyways. Emma looked terrified. Maybe she feared the device was going to cut her hand off. "Hey, don't worry, this won't hurt," I reassured. "On the count of 3, okay? Deep breath. 1, 2, 3! She yelped as the cuff cracked open like an egg, freeing her right hand. It immediately reached for my arm, holding it tightly. I repeated the process until I'd freed every limb. Then, I took her into my arms and I ran towards the door, leaving the lock cutter behind. She was light. Lighter than I thought possible. Holding her was like lifting someone in a pool. Sure, she was small, but how could anyone be that light? She clung to me like a baby koala to its mother, her teddy bear squished between our chests. I ran through the woods, snow crunching under my feet. Once we had gotten far enough from the shed, I set the girl down. And as I did so, her little hand grabbed mine in a vice-like grip. I forced a reassured smile. I had done a good deed. Now, I just needed to get her to the authorities. Child Protection Services, the cops, anywhere that could keep her father away. And I would have. I would have gone straight to help if I hadn't felt the light tug, like that of a helium balloon as we passed a park. She led me to the swing set, releasing my hand only once and the other hand grabbing hold of the chain. It was a dumbed-down version of what had been keeping her captive less than an hour before. An odd choice. I pushed her for a bit, but as the sun began to set, I grew weary. Her father had surely returned to the shed and by now had realized that she had escaped. He'd be looking for her, and I was sure that the park would be the first place that he'd check. I stepped away and I motioned for her to follow, and instead she clung to the swing set, her body trembling, a single hand outstretched towards me hesitantly. "I've got to get you someplace warm, okay? Come on, we can't play anymore," I answered. She shook her hand, insisting I take it. "Fine," I grumbled. I took her hand half-heartedly, but the strength with which she held it made me realize that she felt safe with me. I smiled and I squeezed her tiny, delicate fingers, and we took off towards the police station. Never once did she let go of my hand. And then it all fell apart. All because of me. Because of a stupid sneeze. I just let go for a moment, a split second so I could cover my mouth. In that moment it took for my eyes to close and the air to torpedo out of my nose. The girl escaped. I looked around frantically. How could she have run away so quickly? I should have noticed it sooner, but when I did, it was too late. I looked at the snow to try and track her, but only my footsteps were present in the snow. There were two thin lines next to me, as though only the tips of her feet had touched the surface the whole time. Something fell on my head. Something soft and squishy. Her teddy bear bounced off my forehead and landed at my feet. No fucking way. I looked up. She was floating, her body drawn towards the sky. Already she was out of reach, yet her hand still extended towards mine, as though begging for me to take it, to save her. Even as I jumped to try to bridge the distance, I failed to come close. It was like watching someone fall into a chasm in slow motion. She started sobbing, tears falling like raindrops between the snowflakes, her hands wiggling desperately, but she was already higher than the trees. There was nothing that I could do. I wanted to save her, to go after her somehow, but I was chained down. Gravity was chaining me down to earth like she should have been. I could only watch as she cried and floated up towards the sky, helplessly begging for my help until she disappeared behind the clouds. Even to this day, on a quiet night, I could still hear her wailing cries echoing above. And somehow, she's still out there, cursing me for breaking her chains.